through dialogue and reflection, a path to understanding. The International Edition by Lang-Jensen Faursby, Synopsis. In a world fractured by conflict and ideology, one book dares to listen through dialogue and reflection. A path to understanding invites readers into a quiet yet resonant space, where 8 voices imagine, question, and remember what it means to be human in a time of disruption. Set against the backdrop of Syria's transformation, this international edition presents a kaleidoscope of personal journeys. A loyal official caught between stability and survival, a doctor redefining healing in a collapsing city, a teacher fighting for the soul of his community, and a farmer enduring decades of silent oppression. Alongside them stands a businessman protecting his family in shifting winds, a historian tracing Syria's long shadows, a scholar unraveling the regional fault lines, and an interviewer weaving their insights into a single-foot arc. This book is not a chronology of war. It is a composition of choices, silences, and the fragile rhythm of resilience, a hybrid of testimony and analysis, fiction and truth told with humility and precision. Written from a distance, but with deep proximity to the people and principles that define Syria's past and possible future. The book asks what understanding truly demands: shared words, open questions, and the courage to see both the pain and the potential in those we are taught to call others. Through dialogue and reflection, a path to understanding is a literary listening post, a mirror held up to society and the reader one conversation at a time. Introduction to the book. I never wanted to be a writer, but maybe that's precisely why I have to write. I was born on Easter Sunday, the day that in Christianity symbolizes resurrection and new beginnings. My name, Mikkel, is taken from the Archangel Michael, who throughout history has been regarded as a protector of man and justice. I don't believe in a specific religion. Still, I strive to uphold humanitarian principles in humanity, in communities, and in the need to understand one another, to build a better world. On my private travels and deployments as a humanitarian delegate, I have seen how societies fracture, how politics and ideology divide. I have witnessed how people fight for justice, dignity, and inclusion, often to no avail. I have met people who have lost hope, and I have seen those who continue to fight. Humanism should be our driving force. However, it gets stifled by bureaucracy, resistance, and power struggles. But there is a way. This book is not a lecture. It is a conversation, a series of voices from different parts of society with other experiences and perspectives, talking about the societal dilemmas we face not just as countries, but as people. A dialogue about power, marginalization, conflict, and hope. I don't have all the answers, I doubt anyone does, but I do know that we need to ask the right questions. That's why it was necessary to structure this book, not as a final truth, but as an examination of the forces that shape people's choices. In the spring of 2025, this book took shape, driven by the global tensions, polarization, and humanitarian crisis that define our time. The situation in Syria made the time ripe to explore the nuances of the population in depth. At the same time, I saw the opportunity to use the context of Syria over the past 100 years to present life with a global perspective. I deliberately avoided precise historical events and dates in the character stories, to focus on their personal development and handling of dilemmas. Writing about Syria from a distance is challenging for me. It's been 4 years since I traveled from there. Writing about Syria from a distance feels like seeing the contours of a world I once belonged to, even though only for a short while. But it's also necessary. My time there taught me that understanding a country is not just about being there, but about seeing it from a different perspective. This insight has driven me to create fictional characters that not only tell the story of Syria, but also of the universal dilemmas people face in times of conflict and disruption. The psychological tools I first became aware of during my time as an expat have since shaped my approach to listening and understanding, also in the context of these stories. And this is where the conversation begins. A journey into the choices made, the struggles endured, and the truths discovered.
Chapter 1 Stories. analysis, and reflections. Lives imagined, histories remembered, future questioned, a chapter not of resolution but of resonance. Syria is a country where history and the destinies of its people are inextricably intertwined. From ancient civilizations to modern conflict, each generation has faced its struggle for identity, survival, and power. This book is the story of 8 individuals. Their names are fictional, but their emotional and political journeys are real. Through their eyes, we witness a nation in turmoil, where idealism collides with pragmatism, loyalty is tested by opportunism, and hope either blossoms or fades. The official from Latakia learns to navigate a system that can lead to either influence or ruin. The doctor from Damascus gradually comes to understand that his calling extends beyond medicine as the conflict engulfs the world around him. The teacher from Swida refuses to surrender. His struggle is not just for survival, but to secure the future of his people. The farmer from Deir ez-Zor carries the scars of decades of oppression, where hope has thinned into mere endurance. The businessman from Aleppo struggles to protect his family in a rapidly changing world. The historian from Denmark provides a broader perspective on Syria's long history and development. The scholar from Istanbul provides a regional analysis of Syria's present dilemmas. And finally, the interviewer keeps the stories and reflections on track, guiding without interrupting. Together, they form a kaleidoscopic portrait of Syria, a country where choices are rarely free, and where fate, more often than not, is shaped by circumstance rather than will.
Partso the historian from Denmark. Can you tell us about Syria, the nation and its development? The country is strategically located in the Middle East, bordering Turkey, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, and Israel, making it a geopolitical focal point for centuries. Its population is composed of Arabs, Kurds, Druze, Assyrians, Armenians, and other ethnic groups, which has created both dynamism and challenges in its social structure. Syria has been a hub of trade, culture, and political power struggles for centuries. From the fall of the Ottoman Empire to the present day, the country has experienced periods of stability, colonial rule, revolutions, and wars. Each of these shifts has shaped the people who live here, from the merchants of Aleppo to the farmers of Deir ez-Zor, the officials of Latakia, and the intellectuals of Damascus. To understand modern-day Syria, we need to look back at how different political powers have shaped its society. The Ottoman Empire provided a stable trade structure, albeit one that was limited in terms of political freedom. The French Mandate brought economic reforms that prioritized exports over the needs of citizens. Independence brought reforms, but also internal strife and instability. What about the Ottoman Empire and its influence on Syria? For over 4 centuries, Syria was an integral part of the Ottoman Empire, administered from Damascus and subject to the Sultan's political and economic structure between 1516 and 1918. The region experienced periods of both stability and instability, marked by increased taxation, internal power struggles, and external invasions. The Ottoman administration was hierarchical, centered around local governors who reported directly to the capital of Constantinople. While certain areas such as Damascus enjoyed relative autonomy, the rural population often faced economic pressure from successive rulers. The Ottoman Empire practiced a so-called millet system where religious minorities had certain non-territorial autonomy, but were also subject to the empire's tax and military service policies. How were the economic conditions and trade? Aleppo was one of the most important trading cities in the Ottoman Empire, renowned for its bustling markets and its connections to Europe and Asia. Ottoman policy supported trade, but at the same time, Syrian manufacturers were tied to the empire's economic needs, especially in the export of textiles, spices, and metals. Agriculture was considered the heart of Syria's economy. Under the Ottoman Empire, agriculture was the primary source of livelihood for much of the population, and administration was relatively decentralized. Local governors and farming communities adjusted production according to regional needs, and there was no extensive state-led crop conversion. Although certain crops were linked to trade and export, basic food production, wheat, barley, olives, and spices was maintained as a priority. Aleppo was renowned for its markets and trade routes, while Damascus served as a hub for administrative and economic activities. The significant conversion of crops to export commodities, such as cotton and tobacco at the expense of food, only intensified under the French Mandate, creating food shortages and economic insecurity for peasants.
Can you tell about the transition from the Ottoman Empire to the French Mandate? In 1918, when the Ottoman Empire fell, Syria was a country in flux and uncertainty. After centuries of Ottoman administration, local merchants and peasants were accustomed to a system based on regional networks, relative autonomy, and traditional tax regulations. Now the country was left without clear leadership, and the European powers quickly exploited the power vacuum. While some Syrians saw potential in French modernization, others saw it as a continuation of foreign domination. The French reforms that soon followed would not only change Syria's political structure, but also break centuries of economic and social patterns. The secret Sykes-Picot Agreement between Britain and France had already mapped out the future of the Middle East, not based on local desires, but on colonial interests. For Syria, it meant that French soldiers moved in, not as liberators, but as administrators of a new mandate imposed by the League of Nations. One of the duties of the League of Nations was to administer those territories that had changed ownership as a consequence of the post-war treaties, dealing with the losers of World War I. In addition to maintaining international peace and security, territories that had once belonged to Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire were redistributed, either gaining complete independence as Iraq or being placed under the care of World War I's victors, such as Palestine, Syria, and the Cameroons. These territories were regarded as League-mandated territories and received regular inspections by the League, although in practice they were often considered as simply new colonies by their administering nations. Can you elaborate on the beginning of the mandate? In 1920, France occupied Syria after defeating the short-lived Arab Kingdom government of King Faisal. It led to military control and administrative fragmentation. France divided Syria into 4 territory units: Damascus, Aleppo, the Alawite state, and the Druze state, which undermined national unity. In France's favor, trade structures were reorganized and infrastructural projects were implemented, but without the involvement of local actors. The lack of respect for local traditions and governance models led to increasing resistance, especially from the Druze and other nationalist factions. What about the economic and social consequences? The country underwent an agricultural transformation and came under French control. Crops were converted into export goods, resulting in food shortages and insecurity among peasants. Syrian trade networks were strengthened for European purposes, but many local merchants lost access to traditional markets. Damascus and Aleppo underwent modernization, but only a small elite benefited from French investment, while the broader population faced restrictions on economic mobility. How did the population react to these changes? Syria went through political tensions and nationalist movements. The Great Syrian Revolt, which took place from 1925 to 1927, was led by Sultan al-Atrash, and other groups, including the Druze, took up arms against French control, resulting in harsh military reprisals from France. Despite French control, nationalist movements grew, particularly around Hashim al-Atassi, who later became a key figure in the struggle for independence. Over time, France's economic and military grip weakened, and international pressure grew for a gradual transfer of power to the Syrians. Can you elaborate on the road to independence?
Under the League of Nations, an agreement was negotiated for self-rule, but France refused to ratify it, sparking anger among nationalists. With the outbreak of World War II, Syria became a pawn in the larger power games, and the British and French Free Forces ultimately occupied the country. Under pressure from British and Syrian nationalists, the last French troops withdrew in 1946, and Syria finally became an independent republic.
Do you have any conclusions to add? The French Mandate laid the groundwork for significant economic and political upheaval. But its inefficiency and disregard for local structures accelerated nationalist movements. Independence eventually became an inevitable outcome, not as a French gift, but as a necessary step for a population that no longer accepted foreign rule. When France finally withdrew from Syria in 1946, the country was formally independent but still marked by decades of colonial rule. The French reforms had a profound influence on the country's political and economic structure, and the internal tensions that had arisen during the Mandate persisted after independence. The new republic would now have to find its path. But what that meant for Syria's future was still unclear. While nationalist leaders dreamed of a unified state, they would soon discover that independence did not automatically mean stability. The coming years would bring political struggles, military coups, and deep internal power struggles that paved the way for the rise of the Ba'ath Party. Can you provide an overview of the most significant events that occurred in the following years? After gaining independence in 1946, Syria faced significant economic challenges and political fragmentation, marked by power struggles that characterized its early years as an independent state. Landowners dominated the parliament. Power was in the hands of a Sunni urban elite that failed to stabilize the nation. It created social tensions and nationalist ambitions. Many working-class and rural populations felt neglected, while nationalist leaders dreamed of a stronger Syria. As part of the Arab coalition, Syria fought in the Arab-Israeli War in 1948, but its defeat exacerbated political unrest following the defeat. Hosni al-Zaim carried out Syria's first military coup, marking a turning point in the country's political history. Between 1949 and 1954, power constantly shifted between military leaders, making democratic stability impossible. In 1958, Syria merged with Egypt under the leadership of Gamal Abdel Nasser, but the United Arab Republic proved problematic in 1961. Syria withdrew from the Union, marking another chapter in its history of instability. Under the influence of Arab nationalism, the Ba'ath Party emerged as a significant political force in the region. It seized power after a military coup in 1963, paving the way for a new government structure. In the Six-Day War in 1967, Syria suffered another military defeat against Israel, with the Golan Heights occupied by Israeli forces. Can you describe how the political upheaval led to citizens holding different perspectives? Behind the military strategies, political decisions, and changes of government were the Syrian people who felt the consequences of war and instability in their daily lives. Some went into battle with the hope of defending their country, only to return home with the burden of defeat. Others conducted business in troubled times, with each new government bringing uncertainty. Many believed in Arab unity until reality proved more complex. The best way to describe it is by following fictional accounts, which provide a raw and personal insight into how citizens experienced the period, and how uncertainty grew in response to the political shifts.
A soldier from the war against Israel in 1948 and 1977,
said I was ready to fight for my country, proud to be a citizen of an independent Syria, an independent Arab nation. But when I experienced defeat, I felt it as a national humiliation. We marched into the war with courage and loyalty, but came back with the weight of defeat. The generals discussed strategic mistakes, but among the soldiers, we talked about something else, the feeling of being abandoned by the leadership. When the Golan Heights were occupied in 1967, it became clear to me. We were sent to war without the necessary strength to win. A civilian during the military coups in 1949-1963 said I had a grocery store that fed my family. The frequent changes of government contributed to a constant feeling of uncertainty about the future. Every time a new military coup was announced, we speculated which goods would disappear first. Customers started hoarding olive oil and flour, while trade routes became unstable. One day we had goods, the next day the borders were closed. My children asked why we had to cut back on meals. I had no answer, only the fear of the next coup. A nationalist in the 1950s and Syria's union with Egypt, from 1958 to 1961, said I was passionate about the Arab community and Pan-Arabism. When the union with Egypt was announced, I thought we would become part of something bigger, a strong Arab nation. But the reality quickly became clear. Egypt ruled in Syria, followed arms deals were dictated from Cairo, and our economy was skewed towards Egyptian interests. I saw young idealists lose faith, and I was left with a disappointment. I never thought I would experience Pan-Arabism became not a union of equals, but a project in which Syria was always the small piece. What did this lead to? The people's reactions provided the Ba'ath Party with the basis and justification to seize power. The party emerged as the undisputed power, shaping the country's political future following internal power struggles. Hafez al-Assad seized power in 1970, marking the beginning of a period of firm control over the state. Between 1946 and 1970, Syria underwent intense political shifts, with military coups, Arab nationalism, and defeats against Israel weakening political stability. The Ba'ath Party's rise to power marked the end of decades of instability, but also the beginning of a new era where power became more centralized and political control intensified. Hafez al-Assad's leadership reshaped the state and laid the foundation for the structures that still characterize Syria today. After decades of coups, Arab nationalism, and wars against Israel, Syria entered a new political era. Hafez al-Assad's rise to power in 1970 was not just another shift at the pinnacle of power. It was the beginning of a systematic restructuring of the state where centralization and control became the new guiding principles. The promises of stability and national strength gave Assad popular support, but this stability came with a price. Political alignment, increased military power, and an expanded security apparatus.